Yeah, like you might think it's a good idea, but the market's going to tell you whether it's a good idea.
Mm.
And so, like you had mentioned earlier, don't talk to friends and family, talk to people you don't know.
Hey, everybody, this is Devin Miller here at the Inventive Journey. Welcome back to another great episode. For those that are new to the podcast, I'm a patent and trademark attorney here at Miller IP Law, founded my own law firm, as well as the perpetual serial entrepreneur. Here to help the startups and small businesses with their inventive journey. And so today on the episode, we have Bill on here. Bill will introduce himself a bit more. He's a physician that also came up with a great new way to do sutures. And so an interesting conversation and looking forward to it. So welcome, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. Thanks for having me. So yeah,
And
my
I
name's
was,
Bill.
before we jump in, is
Yeah.
there a difference between physician and doctor? Because I said physician and I thought, well, maybe he's a doctor, and I don't know if there's a difference. So
Well, I mean, a doctor, I guess, like you could have a doctor of medicine or a doctor of philosophy, but that's the same question I have for you. Is there a difference in a lawyer and an attorney?
there's absolutely zero difference between a lawyer. You can say a lawyer, attorney. I don't know. I'm sure there are other words that are less flattering to people, but no, both of them are the exact same.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to be on, Devin. Thanks for having me on. So yeah, Bill
Didn't mean to
Lear.
throw you off there. Just popped in my
Yeah,
head
no,
that was a question I
yeah.
always had. So go ahead with the introduction.
So I'm a dermatologist. I've been in private practice now for about 12 years, and but I also do something called Mohs surgery, which is skin cancer surgery. So if you had a skin cancer on your face, we would remove it, and within 20 to 30 minutes, we would take that piece, we'd process it in the lab to make sure it's clear of cancer. But after that process is done, you've got a hole in your leg or your arm or wherever that cancer happens to be. And so I do a lot of reconstruction work as well, closing wounds. And so the products, that we came up with, that I came up with, the Suture Guard products, they're all born out of problems that I had as a surgeon, closing my own wounds.
Okay, and for those that may not know as well what a dermatologist is, because there's a whole bunch of ologists out there
Right.
that I always get confused whether it's the people that work on feet or the people that work on skin or the people that work on things that I don't even know. So what's a dermatologist, or give that a quick explanation?
A dermatologist is an expert in the hair, the skin, and the nails.
Okay.
And so if you have a problem with your hair, your skin, or your nails, a dermatologist is who you would see. And so for me, I've subspecialized in skin cancer. And so most skin cancer is dealt with in America by Mohs surgeons, MOHS. It's named after a guy. It's not an acronym. His name is Frederick Mohs. And there's also the Mohs hardness scale in geology, but that's a different thing. And so it's a guy's name, Frederick Mohs, MOHS. Surgery.
Okay. And so, in jumping to the quick rabbit hole, so you are, along with a lot of people, I guess skin cancer or skin cancer surgery is an elective surgery or a non-essential surgery. Is that right?
Right. And so, yeah, in most states it would be considered non-urgent. And so there's large organizations, expert organizations that look at cancer, and the big one is the NCCN. And so the NCCN came out with COVID recommendations for many cancers, and for skin cancer, for most skin cancers, including most melanomas, you can delay treatment by up to 3 months. So I haven't been doing any skin cancer surgery for the past six weeks. The plan is that we would like to have some testing so that we test people point of care before we do their surgery. But it's difficult to buy toilet paper, let alone COVID testing equipment right now. But anyway, that's our plan forward. The plan forward is that we want to get back to doing skin cancer surgery, but we want to do it in a way that's safe for the patient and also for our staff.
Okay. No, that's just an interesting point. Everybody's having to deal a bit with different issues with COVID. So just one that I'm like, oh, you always hear the word cancer and you're like, well, that seems like it's kind of a do or die or more critical thing. So this is one that was interesting that kind of gets in the same, a lot of the other categories of ones that holding off for now until they can figure out how to adequately deal with that and make
Mhm.
sure it's safe. So,
And a lot of our patients are in the risk category. A lot of our patients are elderly and have comorbidities.
mm,
And so we really need to be mindful. And a lot of skin cancer is not acutely lethal. It's not like you're going to get a basal cell cancer and die of it in a month's time. A lot of these things are more, it's not that you don't want to deal with it, but you've got weeks to months to deal with it.
okay. I always just hear the word cancer, and if a doctor ever told me I had cancer, no matter what the cancer is, I'm sure I'd be freaking out a little bit.
Right. Yeah. There is that. There is that.
So
Yeah.
all of that is a rabbit hole, which is fun to go down. But we'll get to a bit more of your journey as far as, so you obviously are continuing to be a practicing surgeon and be a dermatologist, and but you also got going on a startup that's more on the medical device side. So maybe tell a little bit about that, how you got into it, how you kind of what made you to jump from just being a surgeon to also wanting to be part of a startup or a business.
Yeah, I've always been kind of like a tinkerer at heart. And like even when I was in high school, I got myself into the Ottawa Heart Institute doing molecular biology, and I continued that all the way through medical school. And I really enjoyed tinkering with that. And even though I'm not an academic dermatologist, I still enjoyed publishing and writing book chapters. And so I've always kind of had a tinkerer mind. And then when I was a fellow in Mohs surgery at University of Washington, I worked with somebody who had come up with a medical device, and I thought, boy, it's really cool to publish things in journal articles and in textbooks. But I thought, wow, like to come up with something in my mind and have it a tangible product that people are buying and it's helping people.
Hmm.
I thought that'd be a real kind of like cool legacy almost, if that's the right word.
Sure.
And so that was kind of always a fascination for me, if you will. And so I had just written a book chapter in which I had learned a lot, and learned a lot about things we know about wound closure and don't, and things that we think we know about wound closure but don't really know about wound closure. And kind of like unveiled some of the dogma that I no longer necessarily believed in. And after writing this chapter, I was holding my 3-month-old daughter. I have two daughters.
Hmm.
And so she was 3 months at the time. And all this was like percolating in my mind, like some of the things that I thought I knew about wound closure and some of the problems I have, and kind of this fascination I had had from this mentor. And I was sketching a night table at the time. And I start instead sketching out some designs that would help me solve some of the problems I had in closing wounds that I put on people every day. And so this was in the middle of the day. So I go down and tell my wife, like, oh, I think I have some ideas. And and that was 2015. That was May of 2015. So pretty much 5 years ago. Um, and so that's how my inventive journey started.
So another aside. So what happened to the nightstand? Did you ever do anything with it?
The sketch is still not completed.
All right.
I
So,
have the sketchbook that I was sketching that in, and it kind of trailed off, and I instead have all these
so
diagrams.
in lieu of a nightstand, you said, "Hey, I could do a nightstand or I could do a suture. I'll go
Right.
with the
Now I
suture."
have this instead. Yeah.
Well, you'll probably enjoy that. Your kids maybe not quite so much, but
Right. Yeah.
cool. So you came up with the idea to do it, or kind of started to sketch, or said, "Hey, maybe a suture. I think that maybe I'm onto something. Could do this a little bit better or different than what others are out there." So then, what was the next step? So you kind of have what is a rough sketch or an idea, and then where did you take
Yeah.
it?
Well, I had watched enough Shark Tank to know like patents are a thing, and that's about all I really knew at the time. But so I acquainted myself with a local patent firm, and we started with a prior art search. Um, I didn't do any customer discovery. I kind of thought, well, I'm the customer, so I started with a patent prior art search, which looked pretty clean, and I submitted a provisional patent. And the next thing I did in order to kind of de-risk the idea is I found a physician pitch competition it was in Arizona, and it was a couple of really great guys that had a company called Synapse at the time. And so they would work with physician inventors, and they ran this like weekend course, if you will, like a boot camp almost in IP and manufacturing and fundraising and regulatory and everything, kind of like everything you need in med tech, albeit not at a deep level, but to kind of get the landscape. And so I went to this, and at the end of this thing was a pitch competition, and there were 8 teams that were presenting, and I was my team, and
a team of one.
Right, and I won, and that was kind of a little bit of a validation for me. So I won $5,000, but more importantly, I won the validation that I pitched to, like, I don't know, maybe 80 or 100 people, and they thought, yeah, there's maybe something to this. So that was kind of that was kind of a reassurance, if you will. And then from there, I decided to go deeper. And so we did the next step I did is I thought, so my device is a class 1 device. So the FDA has 3 classes. Class 1 is a Band-Aid, something that's low risk to the patient. Class 2 would be something like a traditional surgical suture, which goes into the patient, because mine is not a suture. So it's class 1. Class 3 would be a pacemaker, something that's life sustaining. And if it fails or has any problems, the patient would be at great risk. So class 1 devices are low barrier to entry. And also mine doesn't need what's called a 510K, it's 510K exempt. And so basically a class 1 510K exempt medical device is the way you want to start in many ways, because the average cost to market of a class 2 device is about $20 to $30 million. Of a class 3 device is about $100 million. The average cost to market for a class 1 device is about $1 million. And so, which is still a chunk of change, but for a solo physician, it's a nice way to start is if you can think of a class 1 device. I didn't necessarily start out thinking of a class 1 device, but it just was lucky for me that what I had thought of was a class 1 device. And so early on, I kind of, after this competition, I connected with a regulatory person who's still my regulatory person. I connected with a designer and engineer who still does all my CAD work and design work. I connected with an IP law firm, which is no longer my IP law firm, but I connected.
Someday you'll come over. You'll see the bright side, and you'll come over to Miller IP.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
That's for another day.
And so it helped me network, and the network is important. It was really important in this. So after I had set up a network and realized, yeah, I'm class 1 and I've got some IP going, then I had to set up some manufacturing because I wanted to do an animal study, because even though this is a class 1 device, I wanted to make sure that it did something and that it was safe. I don't need animal studies. It's just, I kind of guess, I have a high ethical bar, and I wanted to know that I wanted to put it on an animal before I put it on.
Sure.
And
no,
so,
makes sense.
And by the way, everything I'm describing is bootstrapped right now. So this was me and my wife writing checks. And so, so we did an animal study at Oregon State, and we were really happy with that. And then after the animal study, that would have finished in kind of like early 2016. My wife Jen, she got involved in an accelerator, and an accelerator incubator kind of thing. And for listeners who don't know what that is, that's basically like you'll have mentors who work with you in your business. And regardless of what business you're in, there's certain good practices that you should take on. And what we really learned in the accelerator program is lean methodology. So lean methodology is something that was developed by Steve Blank down in Stanford. And it's a really great method to quickly figure out if your idea has merit before burning a whole ton of cash on it. And the gist of it is that you get out of the building. The number one phrase that Steve Blank would use would be get out of the building. You get out of the building and you start talking to people about your idea. And so for us, that's getting out of the building, getting out of our own head and saying, this is what I think is important, A, B, and C, and going out and actually not even pitching your product, just going out and saying, hey, tell me about wound closure. Tell me about problems that you have with wound closure. And then only at the end of the process, maybe not even necessarily saying, well, hey, I've got this. What do you kind of think of that? And so Jen did an incredibly useful thing that I would have actually done sooner if I had known more about it, where she went out and interviewed about 50 or 100 surgeons. And in the process of doing that, we did what you might call our first pivot. Pivoting is a good thing. Pivoting is you're going in one direction and then you pivot and go in another direction. And we did a bit of a pivot on the product. We without getting too much in the weeds, we thought the product would be useful for one application. The initial iteration of the suture guard device, which is this device, had a locking mechanism, so it locked the suture, so you didn't even need to tie a knot. The problem of doing that is it made manufacturing very difficult, and having a secure knot was difficult. And as we talked to surgeons, most surgeons said, well, we don't care that it ties the knot. We can tie the knot, but we want it to be softer. And so that...
Diving in, because that's always an interest, because a lot of times you get through pivot, but you always have the problem of sometimes you get so invested in the idea, you've been so far along, you're, hey, I don't want to switch gears. I think this is a great, and you almost kind of, talk yourself into it, even though pivot may be a good idea. So was it easy to pivot, or did it take you a little while to kind of come to an acceptance that that's what you should do? Or how, what was that idea or process of, hey, we need to adjust things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit lucky because I was never married to I was never married to my original ideas. And I thought, I always had the vision that I want a successful product. I don't want my product to be successful. And I think there's a difference there. And so I was very open, and I wanted harsh critical feedback early and often. And that's why I wish I had discovered lean methods sooner, because that's what you get is, when you're going out, especially to doctors and to surgeons, they're going to give you harsh critical feedback. And that's what you want. You want the harsh critical feedback early, rather than later. Like, you want it to be ready, aim, fire, not fire, aim at potential markets,
Sure.
And so yeah, when surgeons said, hey, we don't like this original design, we want it to be softer, immediately I thought, well, okay, I'm getting great feedback here. They're not saying they don't like the idea, they're just saying, they're validating the problem, which is great. Yeah. It's just that they're questioning the solution. So that was fantastic. They're validating the problem. I just need to come up with a solution that meets their needs. And so I did. I worked with the designer, and I would come up with ideas. And basically, it was advantageous in many ways because the prior art didn't really have the solution that people wanted. And the solution, basically, without getting too much into the weeds on here, what people wanted was they wanted a suture bridge. And this is what, and there were suture bridges in the past, but they were very rigid. What we did is we took it and made it very flexible. So it's much softer on the skin. But if Jen had never done the customer discovery, we would have never gotten to a better suture bridge.
I know, that's very interesting. Yeah. So almost kind of a couple points in there is one is to get out and it's usually better when you do, and I'm sure you already know, that you do the customer discovery, to not go to all of your friends and family and say, what do you think? Because they're all going to be too nice. They're going to tell you that's a great idea, even if they would never buy it, even if it's a horrible idea or a great idea, they'll never tell you that. And so you never get that good feedback, but just to go hit the streets or hit people that are indifferent or impartial that'll tell you, hey, yeah, I would buy that, or no, I would never buy that. But at least you get that feedback. So that's interesting. So then jumping just a little bit ahead and kind of based on what we talked. So made the first pivot, which was to go over to more of the flexible suture, and do the bridge that address that need. And then you got to a point, you've been, as you already mentioned, been self-funding for a bit, or for the whole process up until that point, and then decided you maybe needed to do a bit of a raise, and maybe needed to restructure things a little bit, bring on maybe a CEO, move to CTO, all of that. So how did that kind of go, or what brought about that, and how did you make that transition?
Yeah, so we did a lot of customer discovery.
Hmm.
And then after the customer discovery, there was getting the product to the point where we felt that it was ready for human use. So we, in the summer of 2017, we're now in 2017, we had prototypes where we felt we wanted to do some biomechanical testing. And so we were still self-funding everything. But because we had worked with Oregon State for our animal study and also for the accelerator, Jen was able to get some grant money to get a couple of engineering summer students. And so we took the prototypes and we did some biomechanical testing with the prototypes, because we really wanted to de-risk everything before we put it in a human. And so that summer we worked with them. And so we got a little grant money from them. And then Jen and I reached out to OSU for a small amount of seed money, just to say, hey, let's not keep burning all of our own money on this. Let's get other people involved. And not only because we want to not use our own money, but because those people have a network. And so there's concept of like smart money. So bringing on money from OSU does a number of things. Number one, it cuts my own personal burn rate that we have to put into the company. But number two, it makes them vested in it. And number three, they're an investor in the company. That has a benefit. You can put that on your website and say, OSU is now investing in us. And that's a mark of something that we thought was valuable. So we reached out to OSU. They gave us a small amount of money, but enough that we could do our first manufacturing run in biocompatible materials that we could make a bridge for human use. And so the first human use was in 2017 in December, and it was under investigational use only. And it went well, but again, we had to pivot, because initially we hoped that we could retain the bridge for up to a couple of weeks, but it quickly became apparent that there was fluid that would happen under the bridge. So we pivoted then to say, hey, this is not a device that lets you close wounds and leave the device in. Rather, you stretch the wound. And so skin has an amazing ability to stretch in a rapid period of time. So this bridge lets you take a suture, put it under very large amounts of strain or stress, I should say, and stretch the wound closed. And so that helps you avoid flaps and grafts. But again, it was a pivot. We didn't pivot in the actual product. We pivoted in how it worked. So by now, we're into 2018, and Jen and I, basically the two of us, had been churning on this for a long time. And we still didn't have any patents. We had some publications. We knew it worked. We knew there was a market. But we needed some help. So we had an advisor, Dan Ladizinski, who's a plastic surgeon, and he was retiring from plastic surgery. He was relatively young, but he was retiring still. And so we said to him, we're getting real tired here. I'm now a full-time surgeon, Jen's a full-time mom. We need some help. And so he said, well, I've always wanted to be the CEO of a company, and he really believed in it. So we said, okay, you're CEO. So we gave him a chunk of equity, and which was the best thing we ever did, really. So he came on. He was very good with the patents. He worked with the patent attorneys and was really good in helping us get our first patent. We now have 5 patents. One of them back there, but the plaques that they sell you after you get. So,
That's right.
So he was very instrumental in that. And then we realized too, we don't want to keep churning our own money into this. And so Jen managed to get us like another 100K of non-dilutive money, but we knew we needed more money than that for regulatory and manufacturing and IP and everything else. So anyway, Dan came on, and then he did a raise, and so that was in 2018.
So
and we did a soft sale, like we did a soft sales launch in gosh, when was that? November. When did we do our soft sales launch? November 2018.
Okay. So one more question to drop or to dive into that just a bit deeper. So you bring the CEO on. Did you vet him? Did you know him before? Did you just a bit of a roll of the dice? How did you make the decision? Hey, this is the guy that one we want to give more control over to and give equity to, and we think this is the person that would make a good team member.
He had been an advisor with us for a few months. We didn't know him deeply. It was basically a leap of faith. Like he had been an advisor with us for maybe 6 to 9 months. And I guess the thing is he was passionate about the idea. Number one is I want people who are into it. And he has a lot of credibility. And we just had a feeling that we could work well with him, and we have.
Cool. Well, we're reaching up kind of towards the end of the time of the podcast. Always feel like whenever I get to the end of these, there's about 20 more things that I'd love to talk about and never have all the time to talk about it. So it's always a good sign that it's a fun conversation. But so I always end the podcast with a couple questions, and so I'll throw them at you. First question is always, so what do you think is the biggest business mistake that you made? And this is kind of with the idea that, really you're looking at it as you always get to hear the highlight reels, right? So you get to hear how they worked really hard, they stayed up nights and weekends, and it was an overnight success type of a thing. But that's
right.
Very, very rarely the case. And there's always things that you wish you could go back and change or mistakes that you made. So what would be your biggest business mistake?
It would have been nice to start lean methods earlier, I think. And pivoting sooner. This bridge, while it's still a good product for us, the newer product that we have, which is the HemiGuard, which is an adhesive kind of version, it has a lot broader applicability. And I think if at an early stage we had started with customer discovery, because we didn't launch the HemiGuard until January of this year. And I think if we had started more aggressively doing customer discovery and really listening even more to customers, we would have because I had this idea years ago, we would have come to this idea earlier. So again, customer discovery lean methods is where it's at.
All right. So iterate quickly, pivot when you need to, and talk with the customers earlier. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question that I always throw out is, so let's say you had somebody that wanted to get into there was maybe a doctor or wanted to get into the medical device type realm, had maybe an idea they'd sketched as they were sketching a nightstand or whatever they were sketching on, but they wanted to get into that kind of realm in that industry. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, do lean methods. Yeah, like you might think it's a good idea, but the market's going to tell you whether it's a good idea. And so, like you had mentioned earlier, don't talk to friends and family, talk to people you don't know, talk to harsh critics. Yeah, like you might think it's a good idea. One of the best the market's going to tell you was we applied for an SBIR. And so, like you had mentioned in earlier, the SBIR, we got some pretty talk to people you don't know, talk to harsh feedback from the NIH, people who reviewed the application. And we didn't choose to go and apply for an SBIR again. But actually, some of the feedback we got in that SBIR was really helpful. They told us to do a finite element analysis, and finite element analysis is now one of our key pictures that we have on our website for the HemiGuard, because we started doing finite element analysis. We started doing more biomechanics, and they were the ones that told us to do that. So, I almost feel like writing a thank you letter to the NIH for rejecting our SBIR. It was the best customer discovery we could have. And so that kind of harsh early criticism is
Mm.
what helps lead to, what will be, kind of the success. And getting to that as soon as you can, you'll burn less money getting there.
All right. So lean methods. Make sure to be you're an evangelist of that, and
Yeah.
a ready or promoter of that. So that's cool. Well, those are
Yeah.
like I said, both I think great things both to learn with as far as mistakes made as well as advice given. So, well, thank you for coming on. It's been a fun time, and I always enjoy hearing everybody's inventive journey. Before we are kind of wrap things up, what is a way that if people are interested, whether they're a doctor and want to use your product, or they want to get involved, or they're looking for someone to give them feedback on their idea, what's a way to get in touch with you?
Well, yeah, sutureguard.com, SUTURE, and then GARD.com. And then I'm Bill at sutureguard.com.
Perfect. We will also put those in the show notes, so anybody that's interested or wants to reach out to you can do that as well. Well, thanks again for coming on, and it's been a pleasure. For those that are the listening audience, if you're have an inventive journey that you want to share, you can always go to the Inventive Journey or just Inventive Journey and apply to be a guest. And if you're in need of any help along your journey with patents and trademarks, certainly feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help with any patents or trademark needs. And otherwise, good luck with your journey, and may your journey be smooth. So thanks again for coming on, and hope to hear from you and about your journey again in the future.
Thanks, Devin.
Thanks.